Good morning. While most of us slept, 21 people, 11 of them police officers, were hurt in a car bombing attack in Melbourne, Australia. Some of the injured were hurt seriously. Police say that even though no one has claimed responsibility for the act, they believe a neo-Nazi group planned and executed the bombings. That group is the focus of an intense investigation today, Thursday, March the 27th, 1986.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant Gumbel and Jane Pauley.
Good morning and welcome to Today on this Thursday morning. John Palmer from the news desk is going to give us more in just a moment on that blast in Australia and also catch us up on the rest of the day's news. And then following news and weather on Close-Up this morning at 7:09, we're going to turn our attention to Central America and talk with Assistant Secretary of State Elliott Abrams about the upcoming Senate vote on aid to the Contra rebels in Nicaragua and about the ongoing conflict in neighboring Honduras. Jane?
Some other things coming up this morning. Tom Hanks, who's starring in a yuppie comedy about restoring a house. Comic Jay Leno will look at spring fashions for little kids. And John Denver, who is doing a concert for a benefit for the shuttle crew and who says he'd fly tomorrow.
We'll also this morning be profiling baseball star Pedro Guerrero and talking with Julian Lennon. But first we'll move to the news desk and John Palmer. Good morning, John.
Brian, Jane, thanks. Good morning. The United States told Italy this morning that this country is now suspending the maneuvers of the 6th Fleet in the Gulf of Sidra off the Libyan coast. That suspension came earlier than expected. The Gulf of Sidra has been quiet for more than 48 hours now, following 2 shooting incidents between American and Libyan forces earlier this week. In this country, extra security precautions being taken at many government buildings, airports, and other facilities, that to guard against possible terrorist attacks following Libyan leader Colonel Gaddafi's vow to get revenge for the U.S. military action in the Gulf of Sidra. James Polk has the story.
Guards are using dogs to check every 10th car entering this naval station near Mobile, Alabama. At Kennedy Airport, Customs is keeping a closer eye on who comes into the country. Is this panic or precaution? After all, Middle East terrorists never have launched an attack on American soil.
What we have to do is ensure that none of them come. And up until now, I say that we've done it with a lot of expertise and a little bit of luck on top of that.
The FBI runs anti-terrorism efforts from this command center in Washington. It has computer video maps of the hallways and offices inside federal buildings in case of a terrorist takeover. The FBI's Special Hurt Team already has been used in the roundup of these Cuban-backed revolutionaries in Puerto Rico last summer. But like the Chilean car bombing of a former defense minister in Washington, most foreign attacks in this country have been aimed at foreign targets here. The attacks on American institutions, like the bombing of the Capitol, usually have been traced to American radical groups. The farther from home, the more exposed Americans may be to terrorism. The threat may be something Americans will have to learn to live with. James Polk, NBC News, Washington.
In Melbourne, Australia this morning, as Bryant reported, officials are still assessing the damage and injuries from that series of explosions. Nearly 24 people, including 11 police officers, injured in the car bomb explosion outside police headquarters in Melbourne. Within a 10-minute period, there were 6 smaller explosions. Many of the injured were cut by flying glass. Others were badly burned. Police are seeking members of a local neo-Nazi group for questioning in connection with that attack. Israeli warplanes were in the skies over southern Lebanon this morning, pounding suspected targets in a Palestinian refugee camp. This in apparent retaliation for a rocket attack earlier in northern Israel. In Central America, the U.S. military airlift of Honduran troops to the border area with Nicaragua continues this morning, as does the fighting between Honduran forces and a group of Nicaraguan troops which chased Contra rebels across the border. We have a report now from Robin Lloyd.
Honduran military authorities have closed off the border area where the fighting took place, setting up tighter checkpoints along the roads. Only local residents like this farmhand who claims the Sandinistas steal his cattle are allowed in and out of the area. More than 600 Honduran soldiers have been airlifted into the conflict zone by U.S. helicopters. Sources say some Americans have also been taken in to assess the situation. According to these sources, more than 200 Sandinista soldiers were killed in the fighting. 2 who weren't are these 2 prisoners who say they were captured some 10 miles inside Honduras. At a press conference, these 2 Nicaraguan soldiers gave their names, serial numbers, and battalion. But Honduran military officials did not allow them to tell their story of what happened. The U.S. says the airlift will continue as long as the Hondurans need logistical assistance. Despite scores of Nicaraguan border attacks over the past 3 years, the Hondurans have never asked for U.S. assistance before, preferring instead to use a more quiet diplomacy with the Nicaraguan government. But now with the U.S. airlift underway, Honduras seems to be signaling that if there are more Sandinista attacks, they will not hesitate to rely more heavily on the United States for help. Robin Lloyd, NBC News, Tegucigalpa, Honduras.
In Glasgow, Scotland this morning, the recommissioning of a famous British warship badly damaged during the Falklands War. Stephen Fraser has a report.
When the original Sheffield was set afire by an Exocet missile during the War for the Falklands, it created far more concern in Britain than might be expected from the loss of a single ship. The 20 men who died in the fire were the first British servicemen killed in battle since World War II. And the ship's destruction by a single small missile raised questions about the future of naval surface fleets. With this ceremony, the Royal Navy answered those questions and honored those dead. As relatives of the lost crewmen looked on, the new HMS Sheffield was prepared for launching. Its hull thicker and stronger, better to withstand missile attacks. Its electronic weaponry redesigned to eliminate the flammable wiring that burned so quickly aboard the original. The completion of this frigate celebrated by Britons still proud of their Navy's power.
May God bless her and all who sail in her.
Military analysts said the fighting for the Falklands would teach valuable lessons about the nature of modern warfare. This ship is the result of lessons learned. Among other things, she carries the same type of missile which destroyed her predecessor, the French-made Exocet. Stephen Fraser, NBC News, London.
And in this country, earlier this week, Richard Todd of Garden City, Kansas, put up a sign on his pickup truck saying, "Wife wanted desperately, I will negotiate, pudgy one preferred, over 25. Well, since then, says he has received a lot of inquiries, and he plans to answer all of them. He says his ideal woman is a 5'6" redhead, 30 to 40 years old, weighs between 155 and 180 pounds, and should enjoy old-time country music, fishing, spicy language, and just driving around." Stay tuned. Now 7.5 minutes after the hour. Here's Brian.
Can't help him. All right. Thank you very much. Now, I know somebody who might be able to help him, though, but he's in Boston. That's where Willard Scott's giving us the weather from this morning. His appearance up there, I'm sure, has something to do with food. Mr. Scott, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Brian. That sounds like my kind of woman and my kind of guy, John. Thank you so much. Hey, listen, I'm without hair this morning. You know, caught fire last Monday in the studio, and yesterday the winds were 40 miles an hour here in Boston. My hair was last seen at Woods Hole about an hour and a half ago. They're searching for it now. Anthony Spinazzola was a fabulous food and wine critic here in Boston, and he died just a few years ago. And now they have a scholarship fund in his honor at Boston University, and that will be on the 28th when they have that fundraiser. We're at Legal Seafood in Boston this morning, where some of the best fish in the world choose to dine. And we were here last night, ate the entire place out of business. They've closed up today because of that. They've got to order new products. One of the great chefs that you will meet is Pierre Jarmet. He is with Maison Robert. Good morning.
Good morning.
Bonjour, monsieur. Qu'est-ce que c'est le boum boum?
Ça va.
And what is your specialty act?
It's a lobster mousse and scallop mousse.
And this will be one of the dishes served on the 28th,
yes.
April 28th.
Yes.
That's what. We're so glad to have you this morning.
Thank you.
Get up bright and early. This is Walter Collins. It's Copley, not Copley. Copley Place, right?
That's right.
I learned from real Bostonians yesterday. Walter's at Arnie's Copley Place, and that's here, of course, in Boston. And what is your specialty act?
This specialty act is leek and carrot pinwheels. And they're stuffed with a scallop mousse.
And that'll be part of the menu for the 28th, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, too, for coming by. And we're going to hurry up so we can eat this as soon as we get back to the news. Thank you, gentlemen. Let's check the act this morning and see what we have. It is beautiful in most of the country, but guess where? I mean, I spend more spring vacations, I guess, in either Arizona or Florida than any place else in the world. And good old Florida's getting a soaking this morning. The alligators love it. They got their dial soap out there taking little showers. 2 inches of rain central and southern Florida. Scattered showers on the East Coast from Maine today all the way down through Florida, where they do become a little bit intense with thunderstorms in central and southern Florida. The rest of the country looks like a slot machine. Look at those 3 sunbursts. Absolutely fabulous. Mild, unusually warm weather. Record breakers yesterday. Portland, Maine was 74 degrees. Los Angeles was 91 degrees. Billings going to be about 77 today. Billings in Montana. Caribou, where it's maybe snow later tonight, they're going to be 64. Here's what's happening in your world this morning.
Mostly cloudy, a chance of showers and thunderstorms today, high around 60 degrees. The shower threat lingers into evening, then clearing, temperatures around 40, tomorrow sunny and around 50.
And from Boston, Massachusetts, a happy birthday wish this morning to Mrs. Riggs Dara. Riggs Dara of Coal City, Alabama. She's 100 years old today. Her daddy was the last living Confederate soldier in Alabama. He lived to be 104 and beat the Yankees. Now back to, as opposed to the Red Sox. Now back to New York, and here's Brian.
All right, Willard, thank you. 7:10 now, and on Close-Up this morning, we look to Nicaragua. On this day, when the Senate's expected to vote on the administration's request for aid to the Contra rebels, the extent of fighting in neighboring Honduras is still in dispute. Joining us from our Washington newsroom is Elliott Abrams. He is the Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs. And good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
How disappointed are you this morning? Let's start with the vote, that you didn't get the bipartisan compromise you wanted in the Senate last night.
Well, we're disappointed it takes another day, but it's not over yet. We're still hoping that perhaps a compromise is possible. We've got the votes to win, but we'd, of course, rather win by a wider margin.
Have enough major elements of the package been conceded to your liking to make you feel certain that you'll come away with something you want?
Yeah, the Senate package is essentially the same one that was very narrowly defeated in the House, except that it will pass in the Senate. There are one or two details that are still open. There are a couple of changes made yesterday, but I think we can see the outlines of the package very clearly.
Are you going to have to accept a second vote after a certain amount of grace period?
No, I think we have the votes to defeat that, and it would really be unacceptable to the President. It's really crazy to go through all this and then go through it all again in September or October. It's bad foreign policy, too, because what people are looking for is a kind of U.S. Staying power. They want to know if we really have a policy, and if you just vote on it every 90 days, then you have nothing.
How much is your case being helped by what's going on right now on the border between Honduras and Nicaragua, and in fact inside Honduras?
Well, I suppose it is being helped. For those who wondered how the Sandinistas would react to this voting situation, that is last week's vote in the House, this week's vote in the Senate, the answer is they don't really care. Apparently, they just have contempt for the congressional procedures, and they just go ahead and launch this incursion. A lot of senators I've spoken to have just wondered, to quote, what kind of idiots are they? Whether it changes a large number of votes, I don't know.
But as you and I both know, administration critics are, of course, suspicious of just how big a deal this incursion is. It's certainly not anything irregular. I think even the Hondurans are saying this is in no way a large-scale invasion. To those who do suggest that the administration's blowing it out of all proportion, how do you respond?
Well, first of all, this is the largest such incursion or invasion there's ever been. There have been several hundred since 1979 when the Sandinistas took over. But usually it's 40 men, 60 men, not 1,500. Now, we've been using the figure 1,500. I suspect that when we get more complete intelligence reports, you'll see that the number is higher than that. Currently, intelligence sources are saying that the number might be a lot higher. So we've actually been on the conservative side of this and using numbers.
Why do you regard this necessarily as a hostile incursion as opposed to a move to be recognized under the accepted international concept of hot pursuit?
Because it isn't. That is, hot pursuit, which in any event is not really recognized as a matter of international law.
We have recognized it in the past, though.
No, we don't. As a matter of fact, legally, you'll note that for example, in the Middle East, we don't recognize it. But hot pursuit...
Let me stop you 1 second. Let me stop you 1 second, if I could. We didn't recognize Israel's right to pursue aggressors into Lebanon?
Not legally. The United States has never approved of that legally. But remember, hot pursuit means that you are actually pursuing somebody who has just been on your side of the border. That's not what happened here. If you look at where the Sandinistas entered Honduras, there's nobody there. The New York Times report today notes that it's an area in which there really isn't anybody. There are no Hondurans. It's a kind of no man's land. They had to go deep into Honduras and try to search out other Nicaraguans. So there was no hot pursuit here. It just doesn't arise. They entered an empty area of Honduras and had to go in about 25 kilometers to find anybody.
U.S. servicemen are presently engaged in ferrying Honduran troops to combat zones. Just how much of a danger does that represent?
It doesn't. It doesn't represent a danger to them because what's happened is they're about between 5 and 10 miles in from where any fighting has taken place. So they're really not getting where the fighting is, and that's, of course, been done on purpose to keep them away from any possibility of risk.
It does, however, and however slight, represent an escalation for us?
I wouldn't call it an escalation. I think what's happened here...
Does that represent an escalation of our involvement?
No, I don't think so. We've had these helicopters have been in Honduras. They didn't enter Honduras. They were sitting there in Honduras. What you had here was a major escalation in the size of incursions by the communists in Managua. The Hondurans then came to us for help and said, look, all we need from you is a little helicopter airlift. The question for us was, do you abandon a friend in a situation like that, or do you say, well, you're under attack from a communist regime, we're going to do this little thing for you. It's really not that large a thing to do.
Assistant Secretary of State Elliott Abrams, we thank you for joining us, sir.
You're welcome.
Quarter past the hour now. In just a moment, we'll turn our attention to IRAs. They're a great investment, but should you go to a bank or a broker? We'll check it out a moment after a break. This is Today on NBC.
The IRA, or individual retirement account, has been around for about 5 years now, and there are more institutions than ever competing for your IRA dollar. Now, before you plunk down your $2,000 this year, maybe get some ideas this morning from Todd Parrott, Executive Vice President of Integrated Resources, a financial institution that has just completed a survey of IRA owners, and from James Dorsey, financial editor of the IRA Reporter, a trade publication for the industry. Mr. Dorsey is in the studios of WKYC-TV in Cleveland this morning. And thank you, gentlemen, both of you. Mr. Parrott, according to your survey, IRA holders as a group are not a very savvy bunch of investors, are they?
Well, what we found out was that they really showed a sense of apathy, inertia, and ignorance about where their monies were invested. They were satisfied with the return, but as a matter of fact, only 25% of them knew where their money was invested.
Basically, they treated these IRA accounts as a savings account.
Savings account, they liked to look at the CD and the money market rate account, a tax deduction, and they looked at convenience.
What ought they be doing if they were a little more sophisticated?
Well, I think we're starting to see those trends. They're going to consolidate their accounts. Some people have opened up at many institutions, and they're aggregating, bringing them together. They're showing signs the younger group is looking more for diversification. And we're also seeing a distinct trend towards self-direction, where they get the opportunity to access professional management.
To be a little more specific, you're saying they are going to be taking their money out of the CDs and putting them in real estate, putting them in mutual funds, maybe just the stock market or whatever.
Whatever also includes direct participation in real estate and government-backed bonds and participating mortgages.
Mr. Dorsey, in Cleveland, CDs were going for, had interest returns of 15% or so when IRAs were first being offered 5 years ago. What's a typical rate on a CD today?
Well, for an 18-month CD, which is the most popular CD, the range is between basically 7.5% and 9.3%.
Having said that, do you agree that it's time to take your IRA out of a CD and put it elsewhere where it will get a better rate of return?
Considering that last year at this time, long-term treasuries were yielding 11.8%. They're now underneath 8%. The stock market's up 30%. There's a good possibility that people might be making yesterday's investment today, and that they very well might be better off in the bank and saving and loan CDs today than they were a year ago. There are many people that expect inflation to take off, and if that were to happen, the stock market and bonds would probably lose their principal value.
Why is it that many experts say that the stock market is not a good place for IRAs in particular?
There are some tax reasons. Basically, if you have capital losses outside an IRA, you can recognize them. Capital gains on stocks are also taxed at a preferred rate, so it makes more sense to have investments that earn income and are taxed at higher rates inside your IRA.
I think I hear Mr. Dorsey sort of saying slow and steady wins the race, that maybe... well, how do you respond? Last year's investment today.
Well, I don't think there's any one formula. Our survey showed that the older investor certainly wants more stability, more predictability, and a rate of return which they can get in something like real estate, but then balance it with some growth. I think the younger investor is much more interested in building and taking a more innovative approach to what they do.
He can afford to be more aggressive, less conservative. Before I let you go, I'm going to assume that you both have IRAs. What are you doing with yours in 1986?
I have a combination. I have a mutual fund, and I have a mortgage-backed security, and I'm also investing in a REIT with participation in those mortgages.
Mr. Dorsey, what are you doing?
Well, I'm basically looking at high-yielding oil stocks. I might be gambling incorrectly, though.
Well, that's an interesting choice. Thank you very much, both of you gentlemen. It's 22 after the hour. This is Today on NBC.
Aren't you always struck, as I am, when you're doing an investment story, you just sit there wondering, am I doing that?
Well,
I mean,
I found it reassuring that so many, according to that survey, so many of us are in my boat.
Yeah, we don't know what we're doing.
Not particularly smart about it.
We'll take a station break. Back now, 7:30 on a Thursday morning. As March dwindles down in this half hour, we're going to conclude a two-part conversation with Julian Lennon. This morning, he gets a little personal and talks about his famous father and his brother Sean. Also, his second family. That means Yoko Ono. We'll be talking about the whole thing. Jane?
We'll also go to Houston and talk to John Denver. He is hosting a fundraising concert tonight to benefit the families of the astronauts who died in the Challenger disaster. And he is also continuing his personal campaign, I think, to go up himself one day.
Yeah. Also in this half hour, a profile of a most unusual baseball star, Pedro Guerrero. I think you'll enjoy it. Let's move to the news desk and John Palmer. John?
Thanks, Brian. Good morning again. The United States today suspended those maneuvers of the Sixth Fleet in the Gulf of Sidra. That word came from Rome, where this country gave the Italian government a note announcing that suspension. The Gulf of Sidra, which Libya claims as its territorial waters, has been quiet for 48 hours now after two shooting incidents earlier this week. Libyan leader Gaddafi has called on Arabs to make suicide attacks on American targets all over the world. So far, there have been no attacks. But Gaddafi's threats have led to stepped-up security at many airports and other facilities in this country. One official said even though Middle East terrorists have never launched an attack on American soil, the government is being vigilant to make sure they never do. In Melbourne, Australia, a car bomb exploded today in front of police headquarters, injuring 21 people. 11 of the injured were police officers. The explosion was followed by other smaller blasts that police say may have been caused by detonators. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack, but Australian radio reports say that police are looking for a neo-Nazi group. Police say the bomb was placed in a stolen car which was parked outside police headquarters. In Central America, Nicaraguan Contras are claiming that they have now surrounded up to 1,500 Sandinista troops in southern Honduras this morning, but the Nicaraguan government denies it has any troops in Honduras. American military helicopters have ferried about 600 Honduran soldiers to a remote area near the Nicaraguan-Honduras border, and the Honduran government has displayed 2 Nicaraguan soldiers taken prisoner near the border. In this country, NASA investigators have now identified the remains of 6 of the 7 Challenger astronauts. The space agency is withholding comment, but some members of the astronauts' families have confirmed those reports. Among them are Claude Onazuka of Hawaii, brother of astronaut Ellison Onazuka.
When they found the crew cabin, they called the families immediately and notified us that the crew cabin had been found. And at that point, I think we all had hopes deep inside of us that hopefully Ellison's remains were in there. And when they started talking about finding the top deck of the crew cabin, which is where Ellison was at liftoff, more so inside of us, I think we had feelings that he would be found. And I think we had time to prepare ourselves for this. And I think in a way, we're glad at least we have remains now that we can bring him back to Hawaii.
In San Diego, a retirement ceremony for a 5-year-old member of the police department's Canine Corps. Clodo, a German Shepherd, is taking early retirement because of a hip disorder. The highlight of the ceremony, 4 other police dogs gave Clodo what's described as a 21 bark salute. 33.5 now after the hour. Once again, here's Brian.
All right, John. Footnote to your news. Secretary of State George Shultz meets today in Athens with Greece's Andreas Papandreou to talk about problems, the future of U.S. military bases in Greece, anti-American sentiment there, and the dispute between Greece and Turkey. As NBC News correspondent Stan Bernard reports, all these problems have been years in the making.
Acropolis means the highest part of the city. 1,300 years before Christ, this was a palace for kings and a fortress. Later, it became the birthplace of the world's first democracy. In the middle of the 15th century, the Acropolis fell to a Turkish army and became a mosque. The bitterness and mistrust between two NATO allies grows from Turkish rule over Athens that lasted into the early 19th century. Secretary of State Schultz, fresh from a visit to Turkey, arrives here this week with no magic formula to solve this, the 1974 Turkish invasion and partition of Cyprus, a still festering boil on Greek-Turkish relations. That modern Greek tragedy caused the fall of the Greek military dictatorship and tarnished Greek-American relations.
And when the junta fell, and it fell with a bang, with the Cyprus disaster, that disaster was associated with the junta and hence with the United States.
The relationship, while improving, is still so sensitive. This NATO base cannot be called that. The American flag flies over the American commander's office deep inside the base. Over the front gate, there is only the Greek flag. Anti-American sentiment, like this demonstration in 1983, has eased. But the Papandreou government is apparently planning on driving a hard bargain with the U.S. on how many bases will stay and where. And for those bases, the Greeks want more economic and military aid to keep pace with what they believe is growing Turkish influence. This is the other Greece. The Greece of fun and sun. The Greece that welcomes tourists. This Greece has new problems.
They want to shed a newer image that Greece is used by Arab terrorists to mount hijackings and then the killing of innocent travelers. That newer and awful image cost Greece $100 million in American travel business last year.
Melina Mercouri, actress and now Minister of Culture, is leading a $3 million campaign to lure Americans back to Greece.
It is not possible to cut the routes because of certain accidents, because it's really accidents that can happen everywhere in the world, in America too.
But Greek officials, knowing that Athens airport is a gateway to Europe from the Middle East, have tightened security.
When I told my friends and clients that I was coming to Greece, they said, think twice, don't go. Why are you going? Go somewhere else.
Greeks concede they need American aid and business. Secretary of State Schultz's visit is to work on the price. What both sides appear to want now is more of this. For today, Stan Bernard, NBC News, Athens.
Moving past 7:37 on this Thursday morning, we'll go to Boston for Willard's weather in just a moment. And then following that, we'll talk of family with Julian Lennon right after this. 7:39, let's go to Boston, look at the weather, and Willard Scott.
Hey, thank you, Brian. The city that just gets better and better every day. Beautiful Boston, and it is gorgeous this morning, but we expect some showers later on. Take a look at the map and see for yourself. Showers from Maine all the way down through Florida. Florida's the big spot. Central southern Florida, heavy thunderstorms today, rain here and there. A little rain in Seattle, Washington, some fog along the Gulf Coast. Outside of that, zoftig, nothing. It is beautiful. Happy birthday, Bertha King of Wenham, Mass., our neighbor this morning. She's 100. Here's what's happening in your world this morning.
Generally cloudy, showery, and mild today, around 60 degrees tonight. Showers for a while and then clearing, temperatures dropping to around 40. Tomorrow, a sunny day in the low 50s.
My friend Roger Berkowitz, this is what you call eat-ola, not payola, but eat-ola. These are oysters, right?
These are oysters from Massachusetts, Willard.
You say zinc. What's
some of the greatest oysters in the world from nice cold waters. They have the highest amount of zinc of any natural food product you can eat.
What does zinc do for you?
Well, I tell you, the scientists over at Harvard, MIT have said if you have enough of this in your system, it really works on your prostate, gives you strength and stamina. The Boston Celtics eat them. The Patriots eat them sometimes. And I wonder what would happen with you if you had them before each weathercast.
Give me one of these.
Here we go.
There you go. There we go.
What do you say?
Sweetheart. Now here's Brian Gumbel.
You never eat an oyster on camera. 7:40 right now. The past year has brought Julian Lennon a double platinum first album, a sold-out first concert tour, and at least one night to remember. It was up on stage with some of rock and roll's all-time greats at the Hall of Fame's first annual ceremonies. How did it feel? I mean, to be standing among them. we're talking about Chuck Berry and Little Richard and Everly Brothers. I mean,
that's right.
Were you wide-eyed at all, or did you feel you belonged?
Oh, I didn't feel I belonged at all. No, I was nervous as hell. When they started jamming, I thought, oh, I shouldn't really be here. So basically, I just kept on the side playing a tambourine. And they were doing medleys. Each guy was playing a different song at the same time, you know, all rock and roll songs. And Chuck Berry just all of a sudden pointed to me, and I went, oh no, because I didn't know what song they were playing, because they were doing about 5 or 10 in one go. So I sort of strolled over quietly or as slowly as possible, and he handed me the mic, and I was like, well, what am I going to sing, you know? And so I just set the mic down and just came in on the end of a chorus and said "Rockin' All Night Long" or something like that, you know. And but I got into it after a while, but I still didn't feel comfortable because I just didn't feel it was my place to be there. But it was good fun. It was very enjoyable.
Yeah. You were with Sean there.
Yeah.
Do you ever see the prospect of the two of you performing together?
You never know. He's actually taking up piano lessons and guitar lessons and saxophone lessons at this present time. So you never know. He might be following us on tour one day, and you know, or join up with us, and yeah, it would be nice. Yeah.
On your tour, you did, and I was kind of surprised to find out, you did Day Tripper.
Yeah, Day Tripper was a song I used to do. You know, when I first started learning guitar, the Beatles songs were the ideal songs to learn, because they showed you the formation of a song and how to put a song together. You know, it's like the perfect song. Or songs, and it was a kind of mini tribute as well. You know?
Yeah. How did the crowd respond to that?
They liked it a lot. They weren't sure about our new arrangement of it, but in most part they liked it.
Would you be offended if people listen and still hear your dad?
No, because I still hear it a little bit, but not so much in the music these days, but just still in the voice a little bit. There's one or two moments where I hear certain tonalities in my voice that are similar, but apart from that...
Your dad, and deservedly so, has a lot of fanatics still out there. There are, in part because of that reason, a lot of people who've put him up on a pedestal.
Yeah.
How do you think he'd respond to that? And are you comfortable with it?
It's very weird to understand, because I wasn't around that much during his life and on stage and all that. It's weird for me to look at him as someone's hero, because he was just a dad to me, you know. Although I recognized what he did and I understood his talent and everything, it's just hard to comprehend that he means so much to someone else, you know.
You ever gone through an interview yet where you're not asked about your dad?
I don't think so. Maybe one or two, but very rarely.
You ever gone through an interview where you're not asked about Yoko?
Very rarely again.
The relationship has gotten better.
Oh, it's real good now, yeah. We just get on very well socially, you know. I mean, we just, hi, what are you doing, cup of tea, you want to go out see a movie or something? It's very relaxed these days.
By all accounts, you have a very good and close relationship with your mom,
yes.
Cynthia.
Oh, yes.
What's her involvement in this career?
She's enjoying how well it's going. That's the main point. She's very proud of me, which is also very nice.
Yes, well, she should be. He does sound like his dad. 7:45. Jane talks with John Denver in just a moment about the Challenger Benefit Fund. That's right after this.